It started with a job. Simple, easy money, or so it seemed. Mark Eddington, a 46-year-old pest control specialist, was called to inspect a remote rural property just outside a small town called Heron's Wake. The owner, a reclusive man named Charles Witter, claimed to have a bizarre infestation issue. Strange, skin-coloured moulds forming on the walls, faint scuttling noises inside the vents, and an occasional smell that reminded him of rotting meat and wet paper. Mark had seen mould problems, rats, even snakes, but this felt different. From the moment he stepped out of his truck and into the dry, brittle grass of the Witter property, something felt wrong. The air was unusually still. The windows of the house reflected nothing but the grey sky, and a silence clung to everything. Charles didn't answer the door. It was unlocked. The inside was even stranger. It looked lived in, but incorrectly. The books on the shelf were turned backward. Picture frames held sketches of faces with hollow expressions, and not a single mirror existed in the entire house. Mark announced himself a few times. No answer, yet the house wasn't empty. In the hallway, muddy footprints, barefoot and adult-sized, led toward the basement. "Mr. Witter," Mark called out. His voice echoed unnaturally, as if the walls were too close or too soft. He followed the footprints, reluctant but compelled. When he reached the basement door, he noticed deep scratch marks along the frame. Not animal scratches. These were too straight, too methodical. He hesitated but opened the door. The basement was pitch black. Even his flashlight seemed to dim slightly, as if swallowed by the dark. It smelled foul, worse than rot. It was the kind of smell that made his stomach churn from instinct alone. He moved down slowly, each step creaking under his boots. Halfway down, the air grew thicker, harder to breathe. A sound drifted up from the dark, wet breathing. Mark stopped. Something was down there. Not a raccoon or a rat. Something that knew he was coming. "Hello?" he tried again. The breathing paused. Then suddenly, a light bulb flickered on below him, and what it revealed was a man, or something that used to be one. Skin drooped unnaturally, like it was loosely draped. The thing looked at him and smiled with lips that didn't belong. Mark ran. He didn't even remember getting back to his truck. All he could recall was the thing lunging forward, its body folding in ways that defied bones. Back in his truck, he trembled, watching the front door. Nothing followed, but the fear stayed. That night, he dreamt of rooms filled with mirrors reflecting something other than himself. He reported nothing. How could he? Mold and a smell, a distorted man. He started drinking more, stopped answering calls from unknown numbers. But one night, while watching late-night TV with the volume low, he heard a soft creaking behind him. He turned. Nothing, just the hallway. Mark started noticing small changes. Clothes weren't where he left them. Furniture slightly moved. His reflection in windows felt delayed. He set up cameras, thinking maybe he was sleepwalking. The footage showed nothing strange, except a brief 3-second flicker where his living room stood empty, though he remembered being there the whole time. Then came the skin, a pale, translucent strip of it found curled beneath his couch. At first, he thought it was a snake's shedding, but it had paws, fine, human paws. That same night, he heard breathing again, behind his bedroom wall. He tore the wall down himself. Nothing, just insulation. But something had changed inside him. He began researching. The phrase camouflage organisms came up repeatedly in old forums and archives. There were theories, creatures that didn't just mimic their surroundings, but their prey. Camouflage by imitation, not just appearance, behavior, speech, scent. They learned by observing, waiting, replacing. Mark thought he was going mad, but he couldn't shake the sense that someone or something was pretending to be him. His own voice sometimes echoed back at him from the vents, slightly off, slightly late. He decided to confront it, back to the Witter house, this time armed with a loaded shotgun, headlamp, and a camcorder. The house was still there, unchanged, dustier maybe, still unlocked. Inside, a dead silence. He descended to the basement again. The light bulb still worked, but this time it wasn't just one figure waiting. There were three. Each had Mark's face. Each moved as he did, delayed by a second or two. Their skin looked freshly peeled as though they hadn't fully settled into their disguise. He fired. One of them shrieked, a sound that made no sense, like static tearing through flesh. The others scattered into the shadows. Mark chased them, but the basement had changed. The walls breathed. The layout was wrong. Doors appeared where they hadn't been. The camcorder caught nothing. No creatures, no sounds. Just Mark, screaming at empty walls. He escaped, barely. But when he returned home, someone was already there, watching TV, wearing his clothes, using his voice. Mark no longer knows if he's the original. He watches himself from across the street now, through binoculars, hiding in a motel. The man in his home smiles too easily, talks to people Mark doesn't know, cooks meals Mark never learned. He leaves messages for himself in the mail. "Do you remember the basement?" he writes. He waits for a reaction. None comes. The man just tosses the note in the trash. One night, Mark watches the imposter sleep, but the man's eyes are open, staring right at the window Mark is hiding behind. A second figure emerges from the shadows behind him, wearing Mark's face again, then a third, and a fourth. He realizes they're not just replacing people, they're spreading, learning, becoming. And soon, there won't be anyone left to remember what we used to look like. The sound came like a whisper crawling under Michael's skin. Quiet, too quiet, but unmistakably wrong. He jolted awake, sweat already forming on his brow. The air was dense, like the house itself was holding its breath. The clock glowed 3:41 a.m., casting a sickly light across the room. Somewhere above him, a creaking floorboard groaned under pressure, as if someone shifted their weight, slowly, deliberately. Michael didn't move. The silence after the noise wasn't comforting. It felt predatory. He rose from bed like a puppet, limbs stiff, eyes locked on the hallway outside his room. The darkness beyond the frame pulsed, as if alive. His hand hovered near the light switch but didn't touch it. Somehow, the thought of light felt like a trigger, something that might wake what was lurking. Instead, he reached under his bed, fingers brushing the cold metal of his flashlight. The beam sliced the dark open, but even in its glow, shadows seemed to cling to the corners, twitching. Each step toward the attic door felt heavier than the last, the old floorboards beneath his feet boning like they remembered pain. The air thickened near the hatch, stale and sour, carrying something more than just dust, something coppery, metallic, rotting. He hesitated as his fingers touched the string. His instincts screamed to back away, but his body betrayed him. The ladder unfolded with a screech that scraped his spine. A gust of cold air rushed down, brushing his face like fingers. As he ascended, the flashlight flickered violently, then steadied. The attic revealed itself, silent, still, and covered in a fine layer of neglect. But in the far corner, something shifted. A tarp sagged, exposing what looked like a coat rack. Only it wasn't. Michael's breath hitched. It was a mannequin, standing unnaturally stiff in a full camouflage uniform, its head tilted slightly downward, as if watching the floor. He hadn't placed that there. No one had. He stared, unable to blink. The mannequin's posture looked too intentional, too lifelike, and in the dim light, its plastic sheen was suspiciously absent. As he stepped closer, his foot crunched on something. Glass? A shard from a broken bulb lay underfoot. He looked up. The attic's small bulb was shattered, and the mannequin stood directly beneath it, as though it had reached up and crushed it. Michael's breath turned shallow. In its hand, no, in its fingers, was a rusted combat knife. The grip was wet with something dark. His legs trembled. Then, beneath the collar, the flashlight revealed something new. The skin. There was skin, faint veins, pores. He took a step back. The figure hadn't moved, yet something about its stance had shifted. It felt closer, closer than physics should allow. Michael stumbled backward, slamming into a dusty stack of boxes. The thud echoed like a gunshot. He scrambled to his feet, heart racing so violently it drowned out sound. The flashlight's beam trembled with him, and for a fraction of a second the figure wasn't standing anymore. It was crouched like a predator. When the beam returned, it was upright again. That was enough. He flew down the ladder, his mind a frenzy of fear. He locked the attic door with shaking hands. He didn't sleep that night, didn't move. Every few minutes he'd glance toward the ceiling, half expecting it to break open. But dawn came. Light spilled across the room. Rationality returned. Maybe he had imagined it. Maybe it was a waking nightmare. He even laughed nervously, but his laugh died the moment he saw the hallway mirror. It showed a single muddy footprint heading out of the attic. The following night, Michael barricaded the attic door. He pushed a dresser and a chair in front of it, placing bells along the floor that would jingle with even the lightest movement. He left every light in the house on and sat in the living room, with the TV droning static in the background. But static became silence at 2:13 a.m. And the lights, they flickered, not once, not twice, but in a slow, almost breathing rhythm. Then came the dragging from upstairs, not heavy, not random, just soft, steady, like cloth being pulled across wood. His mouth dried instantly. He didn't blink. The flashlight lay inches from his hand, and when he finally grabbed it, the movement upstairs stopped. For a full minute he thought it was over, until something tapped the wall behind him. Once, twice, thrice. He turned slowly. The wall was empty, of course. But then, the tap, tap, tap came again. From inside the wall, Michael staggered back, heart seizing. The sound crept along the drywall, moving toward the staircase. He could feel it now, like something crawling inside the house's bones. The flashlight flickered. Cold air wafted through the living room, smelling of damp soil and something long buried. As he turned toward the stairs, he saw it. Just at the top, the figure, camouflage barely visible, its skin now almost blending into the wallpaper. It didn't move, didn't breathe. But Michael felt it, watching him. His legs moved without thought, bringing him closer to what he knew would end him. But he couldn't stop. He had to know if it was real. Halfway up, the lights died completely. The only sound was the creak of each step and his own breath choking in his throat. The figure had vanished, but in its place, a trail, wet, dark footprints leading into his bedroom. The door stood ajar. Something gleamed inside. Michael's breath hitched. He pressed forward, slowly. Each step inside felt like sinking. The window was open. The curtains swayed gently. On the bed sat the camouflage uniform, folded neatly, but beneath it, a message scratched into the mattress. "I wait where you forget to look." His hands shook. He turned, expecting nothing, but the black-eyed figure stood in the mirror, not behind him, in the mirror, watching, smiling. Michael bolted. He didn't remember the stairs, or the door, or grabbing his keys. He only remembered the moment the car headlights flashed across his house, and the silhouette standing in the second-story window, head cocked unnaturally to the side. He drove all night, heart racing, every turn of the rear-view mirror a new terror. But the shadows never chased. Not that night. He moved into a motel hours away, never went back for his things. But even there, even under new ceilings, the feeling returned. Every dark corner, every pile of clothes, every moment his reflection lingered too long. He began taping black cloths over mirrors. He slept with lights on until he saw the news. A woman in a nearby town had found something in her crawl space, dressed in camouflage, holding a knife, breathing. She thought it was a mannequin too, until it breathed. The police found her later, incoherent, muttering the same words over and over. "It was always there. I didn't see it until it smiled." Michael shut off the TV, but the image burned into him. He knew. He knew. The thing didn't hide behind doors or under beds. It blended. It camouflaged. In clutter. In shadow. In the stillness people ignore. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't a hallucination. It was a predator designed to be forgotten. Now, years later, Michael still lives on edge. Never in one place for long. He learned to spot the patterns, the strange tap behind drywall, the static when it shouldn't be there, the sudden chill without wind, but it's always one step ahead, always knowing where not to be seen. Tonight, he noticed a new crack forming behind his motel mirror. A footprint on the bathroom tile. He didn't leave. And when he turned off the lights, a silhouette remained in the corner, still, watching, wearing camouflage. It never left. It simply became everything you overlook. If Thomas hadn't glanced back while locking his garden shed, he might never have noticed the shape against the hedgerow. At first, it looked like a cluster of dead vines, twisted and tangled over the stone wall. But something about the outline, a bit too straight, too upright, made him freeze. The shadows of dusk played tricks, yes, but that looked like a person standing still, too still. "Who's there?" he called out, voice firm yet shaky. No answer, just the wind rustling dry leaves. He squinted harder, a trick of the light, he told himself. Still, a sliver of unease slid into his spine. After a long, strained moment, he turned the key, hurried back inside, and tried to shake off the feeling. But as he drew the curtains in the kitchen, he paused. Across the garden, the shape was gone. The next morning, Thomas walked the perimeter of his backyard. Nothing looked disturbed. No footprints, no broken branches. Maybe it really was a trick of the light, he thought. He worked from home now, part of the post-pandemic wave, and living alone in an old stone cottage in East Sussex gave him the solitude he once craved. Now, that solitude hummed with a growing discomfort. Later that day, during a video meeting, his eyes kept flicking to the garden view behind his monitor. When the call ended, he stepped out for air. That's when he noticed it again, this time crouched near the fence. Not a shape exactly, more like a distortion, like someone covered in textured cloth that mimicked its surroundings too perfectly. A nearly invisible outline. As he stepped forward, it vanished behind the hedge. Thomas didn't sleep that night. Every creak in the house, every whisper of the wind made him twitch. He kept replaying what he saw. The edges of that thing didn't blur like a shadow. They were precise, yet somehow wrong. It wasn't hiding in the scenery. It was the scenery, bending light and form around itself. He stayed up watching the window, but nothing moved. By morning, he was groggy and irritable. He searched online. Camouflage cloaks, invisibility suits, military tech. Nothing resembled what he'd seen. What sort of fabric moved like bark and mist at once? What human stayed that still for so long? He didn't tell anyone. Who would believe him? 2 days passed with no incident. Thomas almost convinced himself it had been stress-induced. Then came the night the motion sensor light clicked on at 3:17 a.m. He rushed to the window, phone in hand, recording. At first, nothing. Then, there. A shimmer near the compost bin, like heat waves above asphalt, and within that shimmer, 2 faint indentations where eyes might be. His body turned cold. He watched the footage over and over. No clear face, just displacement, like reality itself buckled in that shape. He posted it anonymously online. Most called it fake. A few believed him. One comment stuck with him. They move between light and texture. They've been here longer than us. Don't engage. The following week, strange things began to appear. Long, thin scratches on the inside of the garden shed door. A trail of dead leaves from the fence to his back door. And once, while brushing his teeth, he glanced out to see his garden gnome turned completely around, facing the house. He hadn't touched it in months. He started closing every curtain by 6 p.m. and kept lights off at night. But still, he felt watched. Not the kind of watching you can ignore. It was deliberate, intrusive, personal. The worst part was knowing it was close, maybe even inches away, but never seen directly. Out of desperation, Thomas set up cameras with night vision. What he captured was worse than he feared. Frame by frame, the thing would shift positions without walking. 1 second by the fence, next, behind the trash bins, then right outside his kitchen window. It didn't move, in the usual sense. It just appeared where it wanted. The footage corrupted after a few seconds each time. Static, warped sound, and the growing sense that the figure wasn't outside anymore. One night, while rewinding a clip, he caught a glimpse of a shimmer inside the hallway. Just for a second, enough to show something tall and hunched, cloaked in wall paint and wallpaper texture. He began to hear breathing, not his own. Soft, moist, and slow. At first near the windows, then under his bed. He stopped sleeping in the bedroom. opting instead for the living room couch with a butcher knife tucked beneath a pillow. He was unraveling, and he knew it. But so was the boundary between what was real and what pretended to be. One evening, during a blackout, he lit a candle and found the silhouette again, kneeling beside his bookshelf, motionless. He didn't move, didn't blink, just watched. It was the paint. The same dull beige, speckled like the wall. When he turned on his flashlight, it was gone. The faint smell of wet moss lingered. Thomas drove to a hotel the next day. He didn't care about rent. He left everything. Clothes, laptop, even his cat's ashes on the mantle. He just needed to escape. The hotel room was plain, but felt safe. The sterile walls, the city noise, the human presence. It grounded him, for a while. But paranoia doesn't need soil to grow. The third night in, as he stepped out of the shower, steam fogging the mirror, he wiped the glass. Behind him, a patch of the tiled wall warped, not moved, warped. A slight bulge, like something pushing from inside. He turned, nothing, but the bulge was gone. He started traveling city to city, short stays, hostels, Airbnbs. He avoided patterns, kept his head down, never stayed longer than 3 nights. Still, it found him. Once in a parking garage, where a pillar seemed to peel its surface like skin. Once in a train bathroom, where a patch of graffiti blinked. Once in a friend's house, where a wardrobe stood an inch too far open. No one else saw it. No one else believed him. Or worse, some believed and warned him it would never leave. You noticed it. That's the start. Now it wears the world like a coat. One woman he met online told him, "Don't try to see it anymore, just ignore. Seeing it lets it see you better." Now Thomas lives in a camper van, moving daily. No windows, no mirrors. Every surface painted in chaotic patterns to confuse shapes. He never stays in the same place twice. He sleeps with headphones in to drown out the breathing. Still, sometimes, out the corner of his eye, he'll catch a shimmer, a wall breathing, a doorknob that wasn't there yesterday. It doesn't chase him anymore. It doesn't need to, because it knows it's part of his world now. It learned to blend in, not as bark or brick or tile, but as silence, as background. And now, the only thing Thomas fears more than seeing it again is the day he doesn't.